Welcome aboard! We will be your guides during this magical journey into the movies. It's the perfect job for us because we love the movies. It's showtime! Ready when you are, CB!
Action!
Welcome to Monoreel Radio, episode number 314. I'm Sean.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are here this week to review and discuss 1995's Houseguest. This Hollywood picture film is celebrating its 30th anniversary. And it doesn't bother me that the film is celebrating a 30th anniversary because, admittedly, I've only seen this movie once prior to reviewing it for Monoreel Radio. I more or less have a problem admitting that 1995 was 30 years ago.
94 hurt because that was such an iconic year for film and so many favorites were turning 30.
Yeah.
So I think that took the sting away from this year for me, but I feel like there's still going to be a lot of surprises where I'm like, oh, wow. But even this one, first of all, weird time to come out, January 6th.
Yeah.
Not a big holiday release, not that it needs to be because it's not necessarily a Christmas movie. It takes place over the summer, but the last scene, I've in my mind always associated it with Christmas. So I don't care. My issue is not whether it's a holiday movie or not. My issue is more, it's just weird that you would release this when kids are back in school. There's no break. It's just like a weird time.
And considering the fact that you get both Sinbad and Phil Hartman in a movie, you obviously invest a lot of money, a lot of faith into a project like this. So you would think that this would be a movie that would have come out the week between, say, Christmas and New Year's when kids are off from school. Now, I don't know what came out in December of 94. Admittedly, I didn't look it up. But
94 was the Lion King's year.
Yeah, but
that
the
was
Lion
summer.
King, that would have been either the summer or November. Regardless, this you would have assumed would have been a summer release in 95 or a Christmas release in 94. It seems almost like they tried to bury the movie, but they obviously invested a lot in the movie. So you're right. For them to release a film the week after the kids go back to school, it is very, very odd timing.
Well, that's why I bring up The Lion King, though, because we do have to remember this was 30 years ago. And to your point, it's Sinbad and Phil Hartman. They were huge at the time.
Yes.
So this could also be because film studios used to spread out their slate. So if they knew that they, obviously they were going to have like a big animation hit in 1995, they were going to have other big live action films. This might have been, their idea of putting up a big draw during a slow time to get those box office numbers. Or maybe it's going up against another big release for a different studio, and that's why they wanted to put their heavy hitters out, because this is some or was name talent of the time. For me, though, I didn't discover this one. This was a huge one during my childhood. Like, young Jackie thought this was like the peak of comedy at the time. I had discovered it not in the movies. I remember I had a sleepover with my friend, and I believe her uncle worked on it. And at the time, that like blew my mind that anybody I knew had like a connection to Hollywood. It was, that just didn't happen.
Yeah.
In my world. So we watched it. I thought it was hysterical. And I remember we would rent this all the time. And as if 30 years does not date it enough, me saying I rented it.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel great.
Yes, kids, you used to go to a video store, and you had to hope that the video store had the copy of the movie that you wanted. And if they didn't, you had to hope that it was day 2 or 3, because it meant that movie was coming back, because nobody ever wanted to pay the late fee on the movie. If it was day 1, you were up the creek.
Yeah, you had to have a backup plan.
Now, this was a big hit. You thought this was the peak of comedy when you were 8 years old. Is it the peak of comedy now? Is it very much a 90s film? Has it held up? That, on top of many other things, is what we are here to discuss today.
This episode is sponsored by Fierce Fox Co., designers of handmade silkscreen shirts. Fierce Fox has a t-shirt, tank top, hoodie, or crew neck for every fandom. So whether it's the movies or theme parks, princesses or villains, the MCU or Star Wars, everyone will find something they love. The designs range from subtle quotes from our favorite films to iconic characters we can wear proudly in so many different styles, such as sketchbook and concert tees. Listeners of Monoreel Radio can get a 20% discount using the code Monoreel at checkout. Visit fiercefoxco.com to check out all the collections.
Kevin Franklin is 35 and lives in inner city Pittsburgh. Always caught in a get-rich-quick scheme, he finds himself in debt to the mob to the tune of $50,000. He tries to skip town, but the mob chases him through the airport. He there sees lawyer Gary Young as he waits for a childhood friend named Derek Bond, a successful dentist who he hasn't seen in 25 years. He doesn't know what he looks like, so Kevin pretends to be Gary to escape the mob. Turns out that Gary and Derek were reuniting over Memorial Day weekend, as Derek is to give a presentation at Gary's Children's Career Day. He fakes his way through it, and they head back to the Young's impressive home, where he fakes his way through a house party, having no idea what the real Derek does for a living. He overhears Gary talk about their past and learns that Derek is a renowned dentist. Kevin, as Derek, makes a positive impression at the party. Meanwhile, Larry, his best friend, gives up his whereabouts to the mafia. As Gary and Kevin get closer, we learn that Gary's company is taking on a yogurt chain as a new client, which is a conflict of interest for Gary, as his wife Emily owns her own yogurt chain. However, his boss assigns them to Gary anyway. When she finds out, she is upset, but Gary refuses to tell her who is representing him. It's just the firm. Doesn't say it's me. Kevin gets closer to Gary's kids, though he wants to escape the wholesome family atmosphere. He wins a lottery game, which proves to be his way out of debt, because as you scratch this lottery ticket, you get to go onto live television for the Pennsylvania lottery, and there you have a chance to win $1 million. That is the most in-depth detail about this film, by the way. Larry picks Kevin up, and Kevin realizes that he has been selfish and that the family needs him, so he has to go back. He's seen the error of his ways. Meanwhile, the real Derek Bond learns that Kevin has been duping the family. Derek arrives in Pittsburgh to go tell the Youngs what has happened. Gary apologizes to Emily for not telling her about the firm and about him taking on the new yogurt chain. And they have a little reconciliation in her yogurt shop. The family then returns home to see that the mob is holding everyone hostage. Derek, as well, is being held at gunpoint. Kevin comes clean, and the mob takes him away. While the Youngs are initially disappointed, they choose to retrieve Kevin. And they do. And then they celebrate Christmas together. And the mob only wins $5,000 on live television.
And Kevin writes a book about his experience as a house guest. You're forgetting that part.
Oh,
Kevin
yeah,
does actually make good.
He does.
On all of his get-rich-quick schemes. But this is why this is like catnip comedy for me. It's a relatively simple plot. There's not much happening, but they do so much with it. It's like The Hangover, right? You know, the premise is very simple. Bridal party loses the groom during his bachelor party, must get back before the wedding in 24 hours.
Hijinks.
Exactly. And that's kind of what this is. And I think, especially to me as a child, it's very sitcom-y. And I think that's where most of the humor comes from. This is literally situation comedy, because they just keep placing Kevin in situations that he needs to talk his way out of. But let's dial it back to the beginning. I think everything about this intro is perfect for character development. We meet Kevin
Agreed.
as a kid. We learn that he's an orphan. He's on a field trip. He runs away from the group, and the nun finds him at a fountain where he's stealing coin. He's dunking his best friend's head. So it even sets up that idea that he's pulling his friend down with him. And, they're diving for these quarters, and his pockets are filled. When the nun calls him out on it, his pockets rip because under the weight of all the coins. And he's like, it's a miracle. I think that's hysterical. And I think part of it is the delivery from these kids. I just think that they're so good. And then they do the time jump to present day Kevin, and they double down on this great setup. He's driving through the streets of Pittsburgh and hyping himself up, you know, basically narrating his life story.
Yeah.
As if he's a famous millionaire. And I just think it's so clever. And normally I don't love an opening voiceover or an opening narration, but I think that this is just such a clever way to develop the character very quickly.
I think it's great character development. Yeah, I think it's such a Sinbad open.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a Sinbad open. And I'm going to talk, and I'm just going to ramble, and I'm going to ad-lib the whole script by myself. Like, but he's so good. Like, here's the thing. If you didn't grow up in the 80s and 90s, and you never saw Sinbad, like, in the prime of his career, you can't appreciate how good he was.
He did go off script so
I don't
much.
think there was one. Between him and Phil Hartman,
Yeah.
between him and Phil Hartman, I
Probably
really
a
don't
rough
think
outline.
there was one. Honest to God. That's how good he was.
Yeah.
And I certainly do hope, you know, we're going to get to cast in a little while, but I know that Sinbad's had some health issues in the last 5 or 6 years that he's trying to overcome, and I hope that he does, because I would love to see a resurgence from him, and I know he's working towards it.
Same. Or even just like one more before he goes into retirement, you know, just give us like one last thing. 'Cause he's so good. Even like when he gets into his apartment and he's unpacking the groceries, you can kind of tell he's ad-libbing because, you know, he's taking out the chips and he's like, oh, salt for the kids and this for this person, this for the, but it's just so funny. It's very simple, but his delivery is so incredible.
Yeah, I think he has the amazing thing about Sinbad, and then we'll move on. Remembering him as I did, and I think maybe because it, you know, just getting through the holidays and we watched Jingle All the Way, and he's in that with Phil Hartman again. He kind of reminds me of Bob Saget in that you could do very blue comedy, but he could flip a switch and be so family friendly at the same time. Like he knew the audience to play to. He knew when to turn it on and off.
Exactly.
I mean, he was never the blue comic that Bob Saget was, but you get what I'm saying.
Exactly. So we get a series of about 4 get-rich-quick schemes in like 45 seconds. You know, we see this apartment littered with boxes. He's got baseball cards that he's trying to sell and like pray for the players to get injured. He's got a roll of lotto tickets. He's got like a self-help tape that he's watching on TV of another millionaire, which is probably a pyramid scheme. And then you get, you know, you keep calling them the mob in your plot. It makes it sound like it's an angry mob or a large group of people. This is like the Italian mob, but they are the equivalent of the bullies in Hocus Pocus. They are just 2 bozos. But when they burst onto the scene, it's just like the perfect timing for shock value, because at this point, you know, we see the get rich quick setup. We see that Kevin's, it's not clear whether Larry is his roommate or landlord that he's renting from, but they are friends.
Yeah.
And then we see him get dumped by his girlfriend. So he's at home, he's watching TV. You kind of think that he's going to have like a moment to breathe or another get rich quick idea that he's going to fall into. And then boom, these 2 burst through the door and start shaking him down.
Yeah, it's very funny. The thing with the baseball cards specifically was that joke has aged so well, because that is what, if you are a card collector, like I was when I was a kid, my dad was, they called like that 10-year period the junk wax era, because they overproduced cards, because what he said in the movie was true. People pay a lot of money for these, because like our parents' generation that held on to like their Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle rookie cards that became worth so much money. Everybody just assumed that sports cards were this great investment, so they overproduced them. So a great lot of them are worth absolutely nothing. However, I looked up, just because I was curious, I looked up the year that he talked about buying that huge crate that huge box of cards, thousands of packs. If that was accurate, the year, based on what I looked up, he actually would have made a ton of money on those packs, because those packs had the Ivan Rodriguez rookie cards and the Derek Jeter draft pick cards.
Oh my gosh.
So that box would have been one of the few in the junk wax era that actually would have made him a lot of money. But he'd have to have sold them now. That's the thing. He'd have to have held and sold them now.
Well, it's kind of like any investment, right? You have to let it mature. I knew that you were going to have significantly more knowledge than I did of the baseball cards, but boy, did you deliver with that one. I was not expecting that.
And the get-rich-quick tapes in the 90s, everybody had them.
Oh, yeah.
My parents had them. Everybody had them.
Yeah.
I think my parents had one on real estate investing, which was like, here's how you can buy a plot of land for $0.01 and sell it for $1,000. Like, it was just one of these weird... It's very much a thing of the 90s. And there are a lot of things that happen in this film that are just like, oh, yeah, 90s.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit dated.
The
in
McDonald's
that way.
Product placement over and over again.
So, believe it or not, it was not product placement. There was no deal with McDonald's. They did not give this film any money. The writers just thought it would be really funny to give him an obsession. But like, why wouldn't, they mentioned McDonald's, they mentioned Dairy Queen. Why wouldn't you just give him a fast food addiction? And, that's part of the comedy of this, is they keep dangling it in front of his face and he can't get to it. So why not use any fast food establishment and get them to put up the money for this?
How they didn't get McDonald's to put the money up for it, because McDonald's paid for everything.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s. I mean, they still do, but the 90s McDonald's, folks, if you were not around, you have no idea what 90s McDonald's was. You couldn't escape them.
There was a reason people loved it so much. The quality was great. I that is impossible to understand now. Yeah. I realize that, but like, it used to be really, really good. Like, that was a treat. If your parents said you were going to McDonald's, like, that was a big deal.
You did something good. You had a good report card. You had a good pop quiz.
If it wasn't because you read the book so you could go to Pizza Hut, McDonald's was the reward.
Oh, yeah.
So back to the film, before we go too far on this nostalgia train. The mob shakes him down and he's got to skip town, right? So he gets to the airport. He brings he calls it a hamster. It's his guinea pig. And, this is the first place. The mob is actually smart enough to figure out this is the first place that he's going to go. So they see him in the airport. He's got to create all these diversions. He sees a group of women passing. He screams out, "Look, it's Denzel in the airport, Denzel Washington." Very funny. And then this never sat well with me as a child. He screams, "Look, a rat." And he lets his guinea pig hamster go. And poor Shaft is left in the airport. But a child does pick him up. So it ends up being okay.
But he does say, it's either me or it's you.
Yeah. And then he lets them go. And then you get this brilliant transition over to the young family who is waiting for their friend Derek at the airport, who's visiting for the weekend. I just think this premise is so brilliant because there is a million ways. There is infinite ways you could take this.
Yes. And the setup that he just happens to, by chance, overhear Phil Hartman. And again, Phil Hartman was a treasure. But to listen to him explain out loud what his friend looks like, and you just see the light bulb come on in Kevin's head, the whole thing is phenomenal. He does not know that he doesn't know his name. He doesn't know the name of the person he's supposed to be. He doesn't know the name of the people he's about to dupe. But he knows that he's just going to talk his way through this. What a setup.
This just goes to show how much I like this movie, because in a film that's not as well done, I would be calling this out and lambasting it for being contrived. Especially because I think what really sells it is Hartman's delivery of, well, I haven't seen him in 30 years. And then they got back to Sinbad overhearing this. And then he reveals a little bit more about Derek's visit, and it cuts back to Sinbad again. And it's, well, I could probably do this. I can probably make this work. And then to your point, this is where the brilliance of the writing comes in, because it's just going to play to this character's ability to think on his feet. And this is where all of the scheming and the wheeling and dealing are going to work to his advantage.
Now, two things that I do need to call out here. This is where I think a modern audience, meaning younger kids, when they sit and watch this for the first time, they are going to be lost on this.
Right.
How do you not know how your friend looks? You have to understand something. There was no Facebook. These, I don't even call them Christmas cards. Christmas postcards where you put your family picture on it and you print them out at CVS. This was not a thing in the 90s. You actually got a Christmas card and you spent the time and hand wrote. You don't know how long it took. Now you can send out 75 Christmas cards while you watch Home Alone.
At the touch of a button.
At the time, it took days to send Christmas cards. And you weren't putting pictures in them. So they're going to be lost on that. Where I get lost on this, and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but knowing what we know about Derek Bond, he's this world-renowned dentist. We later find out he wrote a book.
Yes.
His photograph is going to be on the book. It's impossible. It is literally impossible that they have no idea what he looks like.
His childhood friend would also have the book.
Book.
You're absolutely right. That was something that I hadn't really considered. I thought you were going to talk about the airport page. Because number one, that's not a common thing. It is when, your airline is trying to get the plane out, maybe a little early, and they're trying to, get you over to check-in faster. But this airport page, who does that? You text somebody that you've arrived. Hey, I'm here for pickup. Also, in a post 9/11 world, this never happened. Nobody waits at the airport anymore. Nobody gets out of the car. It's a drive-by, and then you pick up the person.
Unless you go to short-term parking.
Yeah, but it's not very common that people get out of the car to wait for the person they're picking up anymore.
No, they don't allow you to leave an unattended vehicle in front anymore. But again, this was 6 years before 9/11. So the airport's you could show up 5 minutes before a flight and still make it out. Because you didn't go through security like this. But anyway, there are certain things here certainly that are dated. But the airport page thing I'm fine with, because it's another example of failing upward.
Yeah.
And everything by coincidence, and Kevin having to think on his feet. Kevin is not necessarily good at his schemes, but he's like a Ralph Cramden, where he's always thinking of one.
Right, because, he's literally got to escape the mob at this point. So he's like, I'll drive. He gets everybody in the car.
He put his hat on the real Derek Bond.
Yes.
He told Derek that he was Gary's executive assistant. His wife's homesick. She's got botulism. You can't come. She's sick. Go back. And Derek is all too happy to go because he doesn't want to do, quote unquote, the thing. Now, we don't know what the thing is, but he doesn't want to actually do the thing that he's there to do. So the whole thing does sort of make sense.
It does. No, and it's a really smart way to cover the tracks, because that's why the airport page happens. Derek, the real Derek, is paging Gary because he's there and he doesn't see him.
Right.
So Kevin now has to cover his tracks because Gary never picks up the real Derek. Derek is going to be calling the house, and this covers everything. It's don't call, don't bother. So, now because he doubles back in, he's got to escape the mob again. He wrangles everybody up. He gets them in the car. He pulls some really evasive maneuvers to get them going. And the small talk in the car starts of, oh, how's your wife? And Kevin does not know anything about Derek's backstory. So he's just got to roll with it. Most of this was ad-libbed from Sinbad. He creates this story that a friend of Derek's from childhood was in an accident, and it messed him up ever since. And There's a couple of different takes of this, and the director just told him, like, get weirder with it each time, get more and more wild. So the end result is that it was a shark attack, and his eye was on me.
Yeah. It's no surprise that was ad-libbed. Again, Phil Hartman and Sinbad, you could just say, like, you're in the car, go. And it's effectively what they did.
Blood and bubbles and butts. It's just one of my favorite lines of the movie. And I think that's one of the lines that sticks if you've seen it.
So we get to this private academy, and everybody there is prim and proper in a suit, and Sinbad is in a sweatsuit. Nobody's asking him why he's not wearing a suit. Gary doesn't ask him why he's not wearing a suit. He doesn't ask him if he'd like to change. They just let him go with it, and they put him up on the stage, and of course he's the first person that's going to present. And he gets introduced as a professional in his field. This is where the movie starts to lose me a little bit. These movies in the 90s, I've talked about the zany, wacky movie before, and I've used the same movies repeatedly. Mostly Jim Carrey. Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, okay, really wild out there movies. But I'm going to stick with Dumb and Dumber specifically because I think that's the best comparable to this, where it's situations, it's a very simple plot, and the leads trip and fall over themselves and fail upward over and over and over again. The difference between how well written Dumb and Dumber is versus how poorly written this starts to become is that instead of having them just fail upward, in this case, you write down the rest of the supporting cast. You dumb down the supporting cast so that nobody's smart enough to question what's happening.
Right, because they do try to cover their tracks where it's career day, and you know, the woman that's introducing Derek, she's fumbling with her cards where she would have had that information written down as to what his profession is. But it's like, you don't know off the top of your head who you've invited to come and speak. Like,
I mean, you were so excited to have him there.
Exactly. And it's a close friend of Gary's who works with your husband. So, and we also, you know, we're going to see that Sewickley develops into a very tight-knit community. Everybody's in each other's business. So, like, you would very much know that he is a dentist. However, I think that this is such a great runner, not knowing Derek's profession. And I like that they hold it a little bit because, again, he's got to think on his feet, but they keep making him do it in these very public situations. It's not just the career day. You know, Gary's throwing him like this welcome party, this Memorial Day party, and everybody there is asking him about what he does, and he doesn't know how to answer. We're going to see it later with the tooth extraction. The fact that they picked dentist is brilliant because it's something that everybody needs, everybody utilizes. So there's sort of a common ground with the ability for people to talk to him about his profession, but he can't answer right away. So I think it works. Like, it's a little bit sloppy here, but the runner works overall. My other favorite runner is Gary trying to get Kevin to sing songs that he would never in a million years know the words to. Even if it was the real Derek, these songs are from 30 years ago. You know, they were your childhood camp songs. It's very unlikely that Derek would remember, but just the fact that Kevin would have no idea and he's got to, you know, make up lyrics as he goes along. I think it's really funny.
It is really funny. The thing that I wish that they would have covered, though, because it never happens, is why does this camp mean so much to Gary? You know, it was a summer camp, and I think he said they did it for 2 years. So it's not like the thing he went back to every single year, where he grew up there and then became a counselor in the camp. this was something he did for 2 summers. And when we meet the real Derek, he couldn't care less about this summer camp. Like, it doesn't matter to him. It's just the thing he did when he was a kid a few times. I wish that they would have delved into exactly why it meant so much to Gary, because I think that it would have built the character out a little bit more, because Gary's obviously a very successful attorney. You see the house he's living in, but he never seems that smart. You know what I'm saying? So I wish that they could have built the character out, especially when you have a talent like Phil Hartman. He could have given it a lot more gravitas than he did. Like, he definitely put himself into the role. This is very much a Phil Hartman role, but this feels like Phil Hartman doing an SNL character. And I think he's better than that.
I hear what you're saying, but I think it actually does work really well for the character, because Gary is very insecure and he needs to belong to something. You know, we're going to see this play out later where he's working for a horrible person, but he bends over backwards to kiss his butt. He's part of a country club. So I think this actually sort of tracks that, even though it was only for 2 summers, this was a very big deal for him because he just needs to belong.
I just wish they would have explored that a little bit more.
I'll give you that. So after career day, before we get back to the house, we are introduced to Gary's daughter, Brooke, and her boyfriend, ST3. What was this 90s penchant with white boys shaving their names into their hair? This is, again, hocus pocus. We see it with Ice.
Yeah. I don't know what this was. I honestly don't remember anybody doing this.
I don't remember anybody.
I was from Long Island, North Shore, so different demographic. However, I don't remember anybody ever doing this.
Maybe Vanilla Ice did. I don't remember anybody doing this specifically, but it was, unfortunately, a thing to appropriate Black culture, for white boys to appropriate Black culture in the 90s. That was common. Like, you saw, you know, even as late as NSYNC with Chris Kirkpatrick having dreadlocks. That's what I saw more of, was white boys with dreadlocks.
Yeah, and like bleach blonde.
Yes.
Yeah, that was definitely more a thing than this. Like, I remember a lot of kids doing that, but I don't remember anybody doing this. And so I feel like this was a thing that you saw in movies and television, but it's because they did it in movies and television. Like, it's not anything that bled into real life. Like, maybe this was an LA thing, and they assumed that this was happening everywhere, because I only ever remember seeing this in films and TV.
Yeah.
You know, with specifically to the name being shaved onto the back of your head.
But what was more common, I think, everywhere is, unfortunately, the way that ST3 is speaking.
Yes.
And, you know, obviously they're trying to play that for comedy, but what I appreciate and I think still holds to this day is that he gets called on it right away. And Kevin, you know, is looking at him like he's grown a second head for speaking this way. And, you know, I forget exactly what he says, but he kind of knocks him down a peg.
Do you know what made me laugh with ST3? And I don't think the whole existence, but kids, and I forgot that this was even a phrase, and kids now would not understand when he goes, she's fat, but he's spelling it P-H-A-T. Like, kids would have no idea. I honestly forgot that this was a thing, and as soon as he said it, I had a moment of cringe, and then laughter through cringe, because it was such a thing. Yo, she's fat.
Oh, like, my God.
Listening
everywhere.
To these, like, little suburban kids saying this nonsense, it was that was very much a thing.
Not just saying it, though. It was on shirts. It was printed everywhere. Like, that phrase was everywhere.
I mean, you could honestly just make a film about the 90s and kids wouldn't believe what they were seeing. I know people think that the 80s, I've said this on this show before, people think that the 80s were the year of big everything and being over the top. I think that the 90s at times trumped the 80s.
The 90s perfected it. So we get Kevin home, and this is where it's the writing is really good. We're so worried about him slipping up because now he's got to meet the wife and we know there's this big party. Peppering in this crumbling family dynamic is so subtle in this first scene where you've got, you bring him home. Emily's on the phone with her yogurt chain and she barely introduces herself. And she's just like, oh, guest room is upstairs on the left or whatever. Then Brooke sneaks Steve into the house upstairs to go make out or whatever they're doing. And Emily and Gary are really taking these little digs at each other. And it's subtle because you're so focused on, oh gosh, what's going to happen to Kevin? How is he going to get out of this now? And again, what does he do for a living that he's got to perform tonight? They're just kind of sprinkling it in, and it's really well done because it's going to pay off big time later.
That they do well. It starts with the skateboard on the front steps. It trickles into the phone call with Emily on the phone. You're right. They do a good job of starting to unravel the little family dynamic. And then you have Kevin, who's very excited to be on a twin bed full of floral everything. Then you have...
Pillow Man.
Pillow Man. And that leads you now into this house party where they are trying so hard, the Youngs are, to throw this big, extravagant, over-the-top, lavish party to welcome Gary for Memorial Day weekend. And Kevin needs to continue to lie his way through everything that happens at this party with all of these like kind of dignitaries, like hooty-hoos in
They're
town,
uppity ups. Yeah. And this is where, again, the town, it's a small town and everybody is in each other's business. And they've got, their little idyllic existence, or
it's
so
very
they
Stepford.
think. It is very Stepford. One of my favorite bits in this is, obviously Kevin was at the airport trying to escape. The only thing that he had was Shaft. He didn't pack a bag. So he grabbed the first bag that he saw, and now he's got to open it and pray that it fits. And he's like, I don't care what this is, just let it fit. And it is a funeral director suit. So it's got the initials of the funeral home on it. Just that idea and the subsequent montage is incredible because everybody that he's interacting with, and it's so smart because you get to meet everybody in this town. He makes up the initials to fit that person. Like he's talking to a priest and he's like, it stands for godliness, faithful, and honest. And, then he's talking to an elderly gentleman that I believe is a veteran. And he's like, oh, it's my grandfather. He fought in the war.
Yeah.
Again, I think this whole thing was ad-libbed, but it is just so funny. This is like one of the greatest bits in the whole thing. And then we get to this wine tasting. It is exposed at this point that Derek is a dentist because then Kevin celebrates that he's a DDS. But then they bring everybody inside and Derek is supposed to be like a wine expert. So he goes head to head with the local wine critic from the Gazette, and they have a little bit of a showdown when they do this wine tasting. I have to tell our listeners that when you were studying for your sommelier certification and you had to sample all of these wines and you had to do like the whole tasting, this scene is what was playing in my head because the wine critic is so over the top with the way that he swirls it around the glass and does every obnoxious thing that you can do to taste the wine. He gargles it. That is what was going through my mind.
How lucky for you.
But, there is a bigger point to this scene because Kevin teaches everybody to loosen up.
Yeah.
And even though, it's cut to brick house and they're sort of, it gets sort of silly with this party because now everybody's drinking, there's a conga line. It's a silly scene, but it is important because he did get these stuffy people to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah, and at least they do a good job of building up to it. There's a lot of character development going on here, and even the character development of the family. You get this really chaotic breakfast the next morning where it just seems like they're all arguing just because. Emily starts yelling at Gary, very childishly, by the way, puts his fingers over his ears and
La, 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 la.
like it's just, they can't control their children and they can't control themselves. And Kevin at this point is now starting to be like, I got to get out of here. This is starting to become a little too much. You do so good a job. You do so good a job at times of building character. And I feel like maybe things were left on the cutting room floor, or maybe they let them ad-lib a little too much and it got a little too off the rails, because this film is like a mishmash of really well-written scenes and really ridiculous scenes.
Right, because the purpose this serves, like, to me, it's unclear why Emily snaps. Like, we know that she's stressed out and overworked and all that kind of stuff, but like, there's nothing that happens here that should have triggered her the way that it did.
Yeah, I think she accuses Gary of setting her up, but like,
because
set you up for what?
Because he gave Derek a gift. He got him sneakers for the run that they're participating in.
Yeah, because I signed you up for a 5K tomorrow.
Yeah. Brooke, she gets a pass because you could kind of write that off as angsty teen. And she's overly emotional, and she's sort of what tips the first domino into this whole scene. But really, the purpose of this scene, it doesn't really do anything other than expand on this family dynamic that we already know is not great. The whole purpose of it is getting him to the bus station to try and skip town, but more importantly, he's getting the lottery ticket, which is going to come back into play later on. And he's not able to skip town because he doesn't have enough money. He wouldn't get very far. And this also gives a chance for Paulie and Joey to catch up, because now they've made it to Sewickley. And they're, they have a big boss that they're reporting to that's, putting the pressure on them to try and find Kevin. So then we get to the country club.
Yes.
Kevin was out, or Derek was out on his quote unquote morning run. Gary literally drives by and picks him up, and he's like, all right, we're going to go golfing. So we get to your point where sometimes this is brilliantly written and other times maybe not so much. And it might have served to let scenes breathe a little bit. We get our fourth montage when they're in the golf shop. For those keeping count, where they're trying on, these different clothes, but between the Pillow Man montage, the Grant's funeral home where he's making up all of the sayings for what it stands for, and then the end of the party, this is now our fourth one, and there's more coming, by the way. Well, it almost goes right into the next one, because they play speed golf as Paulie and Joey are trying to shake them down. This is another thing that I don't know why just strikes me funny. They track Kevin to the club. They just waltz on in, and one of the staff members is like, "Oh, what are you doing here? You can't come in unless you know a member." And they're like, "Oh, well, we're prospective members. We're with," and one of them says Millers, and one of them says Smiths, and he's like, "Oh, the Miller Smiths." And then I think it's the guy's delivery, because he's like, well, they are very nice people. And again, to your point, more failing upwards.
But I'm okay failing upward if it's the Miller Smiths and they just guessed right. It's where, because if that's the name of a member and you got it right, then you're just lucky. That's sort of what happens in movies like Dumb and Dumber. In this case, you're failing upward because you made the rest of the cast dumb. That's the big difference. This is one of those instances where it's like, trip and fall over yourself, you got lucky, I'm fine with it.
These two are especially dumb.
Yeah.
So this scene has some really great exposition for Gary, because him and Derek are in a foursome with Gary's boss, Mr. Pike, and Ron Timmerman, who we've met at the party. And he's been on to Kevin from the beginning, because he doesn't buy that he's this renowned dentist. He has no idea.
He is a dentist.
Exactly. He has no idea what's really going on, but he's questioning who he thinks is Derek,
right,
and if he's legit or not. So where this really works for Gary is that he thinks nothing of Pike's blatant racism as he's talking down to the bartender, as he's talking down to Kevin, and he still continues to kiss his boss's butt, and he just lets it go. Kevin takes the dig, and he calls him on it because Pike calls him boy.
Yeah, it's a little rough to hear coming from a quote-unquote Disney film.
Yeah, and Kevin calls him on it right away, but Gary totally lets it slide, and then he does nothing when Pike pitches him on this yogurt chain that would be a direct competition with his wife's business.
No, in fact, he goes, oh, so you got the inner track. In other words, we're going to kamikaze your wife. You know ahead of time what she's going to do, and we're going to use that to benefit our client. And Gary thinks nothing of it.
Yeah. He's weak. That's what I'm saying.
Because he wants to make partner. They don't tell us this until after he quits his job, because he uses the "you were never going to make me partner" as a reason why he quits later on.
Exactly.
But he never dangles the idea of making partner. So we the whole time just think that Gary's a piece of trash.
But again, it tracks because he's a yes man. He wants to belong. He wants, the pat on the back. He wants this picture perfect life. And he will block out anything, even his relationship with his wife and his children, so long as it looks nice on paper.
Right.
I think it actually tracks really well, and this is a great Gary scene. It's also a really good setup because we get the speed golf montage. Again, with Paulie and Joey tracking them down in the golf cart. In the interim, Pike falls out of a golf cart and he loses a tooth. So now Derek has to perform again.
Yeah, he has to do this extraction. And now we have this other renowned professor of dentistry from the University of Pittsburgh who happened to also be a mentor to the real Derek. But because he hasn't seen him in all of these years, in spite of the fact that he's world-renowned in his trade, so you'd assume he'd know what he looked like, he doesn't. So now he's got to perform in front of this professor of dentistry and just happens to get lucky and he extracts the broken tooth.
I don't care. The liquid Novocaine, hilarious.
The liquid Novocaine, he goes to wash his hands. This is Sinbad's character. And his hands go numb. The physical comedy is phenomenal.
It's brilliant.
It is really good. And then what happens, it's predictable, but it works, is the bonding that he starts to have with the young children, with Jason, Sarah, and Brooke. He helps Brooke get over ST3, who has now dumped her for another girl. He helps Jason play basketball.
6 montage, by the way.
Yep. And then, he's playing dollhouse and things with Sarah, and they start to build the little relationship with him and Sarah earlier in the film.
Yeah.
And then they sort of abandon it and come back to it. Predictable, but it works. I'm glad that this is where you start to see the character arc for Kevin. He starts to become a part of this family unit. You're no longer looking at him as lying his way as Derek and more becoming a part of their family.
The only thing that I wish was that he has such a way with the kids and he very organically bonds with Sarah and Jason. But Brooke, he's asked to go talk to her by Emily. And the only reason he does it is because, he's been calling Larry, hey, you got to come get me, you got to come get me. And Larry is being shaken down by Paulie and Joey. He's got clients that are mad because he doesn't know how to tattoo a Harley. And they're bursting in the shop. So he can't really deal with Kevin. And he's just like, be a good house guest. Just whatever they ask for, say yes, no problem, sure. And that's been Kevin's MO this entire time, and why he's putting up with, sure, I'll go golfing. Sure, I'll do this presentation. Sure, I will, drive the kids on their carpool. So, but a lot of the things he does with Sarah and Jason, it's just because he recognizes that he's filling Gary's void. So I wish it was the same with Brooke, and he wasn't asked to go talk to her because he is also the one who saw Steve cheating on her. So it's like now that he's starting to have this arc and really fall in love with these kids, wouldn't he wanted to have stepped in and tried to help her already, especially because he knows what's really going on.
Yeah. But you get through all of this, and then you get rushed into this very forced apology between Gary and Emily. Emily finds out that Gary's firm is representing this new yogurt chain. She's upset about it. Gary doesn't tell her that he's the one that's representing it. It's not until Kevin calls him out on it, and he's like, hey, you're lying to your wife. I'm dealing with your children. Like, you need to come clean. Where he bursts into one of her shops when she's there. It just happens to be that his boss and his boss's wife are there. He smashes an ice cream cone in his boss's face and goes, I should have been honest with you. I quit. You are never going to make me partner. And it's this very quick, very forced, like, you hardly even see an argument between them as when he's exposed as lying. In fact, does she even find out until he admits it in that moment that he was the one that was representing the new chain? I don't think this ever happened.
She just assumes that it's somebody else at the firm. And she's like, I can't believe Jerry would do that to us. Meanwhile, what's really funny is that in that apology, when he throws the ice cream in Pike's face, Pike calls him Jerry because he doesn't know his real name.
Yeah.
The only payoff is that Gary also calls him a bigot in that scene. So he totally gets the comeuppance that he deserves, albeit it should have come way earlier. It should not have happened. But to your point, the end is a little bit rushed because what also happens is, prior to Kevin helping Gary stand up to his boss and make things right with Emily, that's after Kevin comes back. He finally got Larry to come and pick him up. And then they're driving past the same fountain that he was stealing from as a child. And then Kevin sort of has this epiphany, like, Gary's been really good to me. I can't leave them in the lurch like this. I just wish that there was a little bit more motivation behind it other than, him. I mean, it is a full circle moment in that he realizes that he's been a ne'er-do-well his entire life and he does want to come clean. And I guess that's where Gary has inspired him to do better with his life. But we need to see the dots connect a little bit more because the only thing happening in this scene is Larry sort of ragging on him and saying, I've been the good friend. I've been the one to help you. I am here picking you up. Mm-hmm. And I guess that does drive the point home of Kevin realizing it's always been about me. But I feel like you just needed something more than this fountain.
Right.
Or just another line that says, when I was a kid, I promised I was going to make good for myself. And I didn't. But now I see what I need to do because of Gary and because of people like you. Like, maybe you don't need it so see and say, but there just needed to be something a little bit more where he takes ownership of everything that he's done.
But he goes back to do the right thing. Then you get the apology in the shop. Then they all go back to the house. In the interim, the real Derek Bond is receiving faxes from, I don't know, but he's receiving faxes and he sees a fax, the front page of the Gazette, where he, quote unquote, had a very successful speech at Career Day, and he sees that obviously he was not there, but this is the guy that sent me away in the airport. So now he's come back from Baltimore to Pittsburgh to tell the family what has happened.
Before that, though, there is another very important scene because Emily is not the only one that gets her apology. Also in the interim, it is probably my favorite scene where ST3 gets his shakedown because he owes Brooke a big apology. So before everything culminates at the Young's house, Kevin takes him for a ride in the Jeep and literally scares him to death because they're on the train tracks. There's a train coming. It's not on the same track. It's a massive fake out. But the metaphor is hilarious too, where he compares Brooke to a lovely chicken dinner, and Kelly, the girl that he is cheating with, a greasy chicken McNugget, and gets him to see the error in his ways and beg Brooke for forgiveness. And then he also tells him, he's like, "You're not from the hood. Drop the speech."
Yeah.
This scene, it's just one of the best edited scenes I have ever seen in my life.
It's really good.
I didn't want to skip over it. Go on.
So now we get to the house where the family is being held at gunpoint, and he needs to expose the truth. That I am not Derek Bond. I lied to you the whole time. And that's it. Now, the funniest part about this is they leave with him. The mob leaves with him. They leave the family back in the house with the real Derek, who tells them that this whole thing's over $50,000. And Gary's like, "That's all this is about?" You know, like, he's
kind of just like, "I'll just pay it.
I'll just pay it. I'll bail him out." And Derek says, "You would do this for this person?" He goes, "Well, he's my oldest friend." And that says a lot, because he's given up on the real Derek as a friend, because the real Derek is obnoxious. The fact that he's only known this guy for 3 days and it's his oldest friend goes back to what you had said, where he lives a very sheltered life and he is trying to kind of fake his way through it. And I think that the line is often overlooked. But specifically what stood out to me is I hit pause on this because I was watching this in the afternoon before I went to work. And I got up, I think, to throw leftovers in the oven. And you were talking to me and you said, "Well, I don't want to hold you up because I want you to finish the movie." And as it was paused and I could see how much runtime was left, I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to finish this awfully quick because it says there's 10 minutes left in this and I can assume 5 of it are the closing credits. So I guess the end is predictable and fast." And the end was predictable and fast. What bothers me, both times I have watched this movie this week, is that they leave with Kevin, the mob, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Gary, as only Phil Hartman can do, "I'm going after him." The whole family goes, including the family dog,
who was tied up. Emily was more upset about Carl than her own children.
But why is Gary allowing his children and his wife to pursue men with guns?
Not to mention, now you've got a stranger in your home because you don't know the real Derek and you just leave him there.
Yeah.
The funniest part about it to me, though, and it does sort of drag the scene a little bit when they are being held at gunpoint, Gary's bigger issue than his family being in danger is prove you're the real Derek. But it also plays to what you said. He truly believes that Kevin is his oldest and now best friend.
Yeah.
And he can't believe that there's a threat to that more so than the threat to his own family.
So you get this senseless 5K. This whole thing, because they've talked about this 5K that they're running. It's kind of been like a recurring bit throughout the movie.
All through Ron's character, the other dentist that's been questioning. It is sort of a visual metaphor for him challenging Kevin at every step along the way.
But it makes no sense.
It's just for the pursuit of the bad guys.
Yeah. They literally pursue each other through the 5K. Somebody just hands Kevin and Gary bibs. "You can't run without these." Okay. And they slap them on and they're running through people's backyards and they're stopping to eat at a barbecue. Like, it's a lot of things happening all at once.
I think it was kind of a force, though, because Paulie and Joey had Kevin. So the reason he escapes is because they shoot the gun off for the beginning of the race, which was supposed to be Kevin's bullet, but Paulie doesn't actually pull the trigger. And Kevin uses that as an opportunity to get out of the car because he sees that the car's on. Because another telltale of the 90s, it was the car lock. The ones that stick up straight out of the door that you could visually see was unlocked.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like now with key fobs.
Right.
This was literally the lock was sticking straight up.
Yeah,
So
it
the
looked
car
like
was
a golf
unlocked.
tee that would go up and down.
Yeah, and then he jumps out of the car as a means to escape. But I feel like, I mean, they have been building to the race the entire time. So like it does work as far as everything coming together, but because it is so rushed, it doesn't feel like it serves a greater purpose, because then at the end of it, they literally run right back into them.
Right. And basically he hands the mob the lotto ticket, which will put them on television, and the big mob boss loves watching this on TV every day, so he finds out that not only is he going to go on TV, but he's got the opportunity to win up to $1 million, and that far trumps the $50,000 that Kevin owes. So flash forward 6 months, they end up on TV. They don't win the $1 million. They win $5,000. Kevin has written his book, which has now become a bestseller.
I actually like that for Kevin.
I like it for Kevin. It's fine. I think that would be a book that I would want to read. You know, dupe your way through it. And now it's Christmas time, and we're all celebrating Christmas together. And Gary and Kevin are in the backyard on the charcoal grill making up Christmas songs about hamburgers and French fries.
Which Phil Hartman did right, by the way. And those songs play over the credits. And again, 8-year-old Jackie thought that was peak comedy. Load the grill with fatty meat, put it on a bun, and eat, eat, eat.
Well, there were a lot of things that stood out to you in the 90s. I'm sure things that stood out to you today, things that you were on the lookout for. Maybe you noticed something you hadn't seen before. Where in the Film is brought to you by our friends at Where in the Park, a seek-and-find card game that you can play in your favorite parks, whether it's Disney or Universal, SeaWorld, or more. Where in the Park challenges you to spot those little details that so many can miss. To order your game packs, visit monoreelradio.com and click our affiliate link for a 10% discount today.
You go first, because I think we have the same one, because I saw you scribbling feverishly at the same point I was. So I have a backup in case it's the same one.
Okay, so when they are in the house party.
That's the one.
After they all start drinking wine and they get very, very drunk, they start playing Brick House. They're karaokeing Brick House. And Kevin tells them, jump around. And they all start jumping up and down.
Yep.
The set is literally shaking. Because there's got to be 30 or 40 people that are jumping.
It's not the set. They're in a house. It's a camera. They shook the camera.
But the chandelier was shaking.
Well, yeah, that does too.
But, yeah, everything is shaking. Like, it looks like... It certainly looks like they're in the middle of an earthquake.
Yeah, okay. That was one of the big ones for me, but I do have another one. They make it very pointed that Larry is to meet Kevin to pick him up in front of McDonald's at 9:30. And then they give us a few driving shots to show that they're leaving town and heading back to Pittsburgh. But one of them is at sunset. And I realize that the closer you get to the time zone, to the border where the next time zone jumps, the sun does set later, as we learned in Cleveland when we had daylight until almost like 10 o'clock at night. But
that's Cleveland.
And it wasn't, this was stock footage, basically. Yeah. And that was kind of a flub. That was sloppy.
That was further west, far further west than Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Good catch. All right, let's talk about our cast here, starting with Sinbad, who plays Kevin Franklin. I said it before. Sinbad, prime Sinbad in the 90s, you couldn't touch him. He was everywhere. I think at times he was given roles that sort of played him down a little bit. Like his cameo in Good Burger is just not good. I mean, Good Burger sucks. I'm sorry. I hate.
How dare you, sir?
I hated that movie when I saw it in theaters as a kid, and I was in the target demographic. And I've watched it a few times. I have it on DVD because that was one of those things. It was like I wanted to rewatch it, but it was cheaper to buy it than it was to rent it because I think I pulled it out of a $1 bin at Walmart. When I watch it, I laugh for the nostalgia of it, but he's so wasted in that movie. But in spite of the fact that this movie has some script problems, I love him in this movie. I think that he has I think the comedy, when it lands, is very good. I think the heart is there. Predictable as it may be, I think that he has a full character arc, and I really do enjoy him in this movie.
He's absolutely incredible in this movie, and not just because of the comedy. I mean, the ad-libbing is top tier. We said it earlier, he can play the comedy for adults and for kids, and it's equally funny in equal measure. But I don't think he gets enough credit for how talented of an actor he truly is, because one of the things that I noticed is that he's so present in these scenes. And that's something that, you know, for a good actor, you shouldn't notice. Their reactions to their scene partners, if they're not speaking, it should feel very natural. They shouldn't be trying to steal attention away from the person delivering the lines. But you also can't stand there and do nothing either. And he's just got this look in his eyes where he's so present, and you can tell that he's paying attention. But I think the reason he sort of calls attention to himself is because he's a big guy. He's so large, he's so tall, and I noticed he sort of like leans into his scene partner and sort of like gets down to their level.
Yeah.
And it's just like this subtle thing, but he's so attentive. And I think, you know, it's the mark of a really good actor. And I think because he's a comedian, he doesn't get enough credit for that. But he's just incredible. And, you know, I'm sure we're going to go right to Phil Hartman next. It's worth noting their chemistry is unreal together. You mentioned Jingle All the Way. This was actually their third film together. First was Coneheads, but they didn't appear in scene together. And same thing, I don't think they have a scene together in Jingle All the Way, which is a huge miss. But clearly there is a friendship, there is a relationship here, because this sort of thing can't be faked.
Phil Hartman, as Gary Young, Phil Hartman was a treasure. His death was so shocking.
Yeah, it was awful.
It was awful. I mean, the circumstances were shocking, but he was so beloved. You know, I think that people forget how long he was on Saturday Night Live, and that Saturday Night Live cast was that was probably, no shade thrown at the original cast because they were groundbreaking. I honestly think he was probably on the best cast that show ever had.
One of them, certainly one of them.
Yeah, he's great in this film. Like I said, he put himself into it. At times, it did feel a little SNL-y. And I think at times they wrote the character down, which I think was a disservice to Phil Hartman because he was a genius. But even still, the chemistry with Sinbad was there. I just wish that they would have done the character a bit more justice, because I think they owed that to the talent behind it.
Yeah, and I think you could have done that a lot more through the relationship with his wife. But I think that he is so funny in this, which is truly remarkable because he doesn't have any funny lines. All of the funny dialogue comes from Sinbad. And some of the ad-lib stuff is great, but like essentially he's playing the straight man and he's still hilarious.
Yeah. Kim Greist plays Emily Young. A wife. She just plays wife. This character is, I don't want to call her dumb because that's not fair. And she obviously works very hard as a mother and runs a very successful business, but she's so one-dimensional and there's nothing special about her. She has no relationship with her husband. She's got no relationship with her children. But they don't write her enough as being like pantsuit business mom of the 90s either. It's almost like she was initially written as a housewife and they changed her role, but kept her in the same dialogue in the same costume and in the same situations. Does that make sense?
It does. I
Because
think,
she's always like on the phone, like mixing batter in a bowl.
yeah, or they're in bed and she's on her laptop. I think this is one of those instances where women entered the workforce in the 90s and men did not know how to write it.
Yes, I think you're right.
Because the visuals are so on the nose. It's, we need her to be a mom, but we also have to show that she worked. The only scene where she really does anything for me is the opening one where she's on the phone and ignoring the chaos, but also contributing to the chaos around her.
It's just a very weak character, and I feel like anybody could have played her.
You also needed more. You needed to show her like interacting with people at the party and that kind of thing.
Exactly. You know, like, let her be, like, I would have liked her more if they had written her more Stepford. Like, this is crazy, and we're going to fake it in front of our house guests because these are the people that we interact with at the country club, and we need to hold our status. But then you lose any likability with her. But there's not a whole lot of it to begin with. So I feel like you could have done a little bit more with this character.
Or they dipped their toes into it and backed out of it. She puts the onus on Gary to bond with the kids.
Yes.
And I think if they had deepened that a little bit more, then you would have added a layer to her.
Or if she would have been the housewife initially, and she started this chain and it was doing more and getting better and better and better, and she had to put more of the parenting on Gary because her career was taking off and he got jealous. And that all starts to now play into this very self-consciousness of Gary. You could have done so much more with her. Kim Murphy, Chauncey Leopardi, and Talia Sider are the young kids, Brooke, Jason, and Sarah. They're very much 90s kids. Like, they are 90s kids tropes. You've got the angsty teen, the middle child who's craving attention, and the aw shucks little cute youngest one who always seemed to be a girl, by the way. It was always a youngest daughter. It was never like a youngest son. It was always the youngest daughter, to my memory.
I don't know, Jerry Maguire kid.
He was an only child. That's different.
This might have been because Full House was such a thing. I thought the kids did a great job because they were asked to carry quite a bit. I have to say, for the longest time, I thought Brooke was played by Rose McGowan. She looks just like her, and the age would have absolutely worked. Turns out it's not. But yeah, I mean, for her, angsty teen, it does feel kind of tropey until she gets her moment at the end when she tells Steve to go pound salt after he begs for her forgiveness. Chauncey Leopardi, huge child actor. He was on a couple of episodes of Boy Meets World. He was in The Sandlot. He's such a familiar face. He's been in a whole bunch of things. I think he did good though. Like, if you think about the driving scene where he's so panicked, I think he's really great in that. And then Sarah, to me, what a little cutie pie. She's not necessarily the annoying quip machine that most of these characters are written off as. Like, I think she handles it really well, especially when, you know, she does the little French lesson when Derek is first settling in, or Kevin as Derek is first settling in the house. I think she's so cute in that scene, delivering the French lines, even though she does look right into the camera at one point. But then later on, when she takes the gun from Paulie and Joey, I think she's hysterical.
But that's almost quippy. Mommy says, don't play with guns. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, it's funny. Here's the thing. Like, I wish we would have gotten more with the three of them. Instead of some of these random acts of, whoa, hijinks, 90s, with Sinbad out on a golf course or whatever, get rid of one of your montages, you could have done more with the kids. You could have built his relationship more with the kids, because now Mrs. Doubtfire is a completely different film. That's completely about Robin Williams' character trying to save the relationship with his children.
Right.
totally different, but he gets those moments in between the insanity where it breathes, and he has incredible relationship building moments with the kids. You could have done that here, and Sinbad could have carried the weight.
Or even if it's not bonding moments with the kids and Sinbad, because I think he does bond with each of them individually, it would have been great to see them bonding with each other and see a real fallout from we're being neglected by our parents. Really, and that being led by Brooke because she's the eldest, it would have given her a lot more to do.
It's amazing. By the way, speaking of Chauncey Leopardi, you want to talk about Superman and Clark Kent. You don't put the glasses on him, and you don't realize that it's squints.
Yeah.
It's crazy how different he looks when you put the glasses on. Moving on to Paul Ben Victor and Tony Longo as Paulie and Joey. Yeah, bumbling hijinks. That's sort of the theme of the film. To me, Tony Longo, I look at him and I just think about Angels in the Outfield. I'll always think Angels in the Outfield before I think this. But it's also because I also had Angels in the Outfield to me was a go-to as a kid.
Yeah, that was definitely more your movie. I think for these two bozos, they really handled the comedy well, especially because of the drastic size difference between the two of them. You know, a lot of that was as written, like when they're flipping each other over the fences and that kind of thing. But I feel like a lot of the more memorable lines come from them, and a lot of the comedy, you know, the things that I really found funny as a child came from these two.
Final thoughts on Houseguest. I'll go first because I have less of a history with this. You know what? It's fun. It's a romp. It's very much a 90s movie, if you haven't figured that out by now. Do I think the movie holds up? Not necessarily. I think that I think a lot of the humor is still very funny, but I think the whole notion that you're not going to know who somebody is going to be completely lost on a modern audience. They're not going to understand why we don't have smartphones. They're not going to understand a world without social media. Right, wrong, or indifferent. They're just not gonna get it. A lot of the 90s references are going to be over their head. You know, the constantly wearing the Chicago Bulls stuff, that was such a 90s thing because of Jordan. The price at McDonald's, where you could get a Big Mac, large fries, and a large Coke for under $5. Listen, everybody wishes that would come back. Frankly, I don't know why it doesn't, but because the quality of the food isn't there.
Quality is not worth $5 now.
No, it's not worth $15 either, but that's what they smack you. I just think that kids today, I think they'll think it's silly. They'll laugh at the silliness, but I don't think they're going to quite understand why this was so funny, because this was a moderate box office success for Disney when they put it out. It's fun. It's a fun revisit. I think it does have rewatchability for our generation. I think for a modern generation, they're going to be a one and done with this.
All fair points, and I do agree with you. I think that the premise certainly feels dated to a modern audience, because you're absolutely right with social media, and even, you know, if somebody doesn't have social media, you know, there's LinkedIn, it's impossible to be completely off the grid.
Right.
Where nobody would know who you were or be able to look you up very easily.
Especially if you're world renowned.
Exactly.
And write books.
Exactly. So that all gets lost, but I feel like the individual scenes themselves, other than the clothes and some of the, you know, dialogue, like the word fat, I don't think the actual scenes feel that dated, and I certainly think that the comedy holds. I mean, is this the masterpiece I thought that this was when I was 8 years old? No, there are certainly better movies out there, but it's still certainly fun to rewatch. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. For Phil Hartman playing opposite Sinbad, that's where the true comedy comes from. And I think that despite some of its warts, that's where you'd really enjoy it if you've never seen it.
And we want to know what you have to say about Houseguest. You can let us know through email at monoreelradio@gmail.com, or you can shoot us a message on any form of social media at Monoreel Radio. News of the week is coming up, but first a quick break.
News of the Week is proudly sponsored by KMV Travel. KMV Travel is a boutique travel agency that helps families plan personalized vacations and create unforgettable memories on land and at sea. KMV Travel specializes in Disney destinations, family theme parks, and most major cruise lines, providing unmatched service from start to finish with the belief that vacations are an important part of life. KMV Travel will help you and your family experience new places, learn about other cultures, relax, and reconnect with those who mean most. KMV Travel will guide you from booking to bon voyage, ensuring you have the tools you need to enjoy each moment of your vacation at no extra cost to you. Visit kmvtravel.com to connect with an expert travel advisor and start planning your getaway now.
The Golden Globes were this past weekend, and the Walt Disney Company walked away with 6 Golden Globes. Shogun won 4 Golden Globes for FX and Hulu. The Bear only won 1, which I think took a lot of people by surprise. And then you have A Real Pain with 1 award as well.
Well, I think that people, because it is award season, so like I get it, there's just an oversaturation, but I think people forget that these are not the Emmys, which are also broken down into daytime and primetime. There are a lot more awards to be given out. So that's why, like, when you do have the Emmys, Disney walks away with like 40 of them.
Right.
And there's like hundreds of nominations. This is best of television and film, so there are a lot fewer categories for TV. But worth noting, Shogun won Best Actor. And it didn't occur to me at the time, like, why does he look so familiar? Why does he look so familiar? He got his start in Thor.
Yes.
He was one of, the team who we said did not get enough love and or credit because they were kind of in the background when we reviewed Thor.
So that's the news for the entertainment side. Now let's talk about parks related. And we've wondered when Disney was going to start rolling out, specifically at Walt Disney World, discounts. Because Universal Epic Universe is opening right around Memorial Day. That seems to be the target date. I don't know the exact date. I'm not going to lie.
It's Memorial Day for Epic Universe, but for Disney, they did have discounts released for the first quarter. They were doing them quarterly, thereabouts. Then last year they started doing them like 6 months out. Now I kind of feel like we are back to quarterly, but this is sort of what I was waiting for, in the sense of, when are you going to acknowledge Universal's presence and that they are coming out swinging this summer. So we do have some discounts being offered through the summertime. You do get your typical 25 to 30% off rooms. They are bringing back the free dining plan. I believe that's with a 5-night stay.
It's with a 3-night stay, and you have to have the park hopper.
Park hopper. Okay, that was something that they did do in 2024. That's not a completely new promotion. But where they really are offering a break is with the Florida residents and the annual pass holder. Those are some pretty steep discounts.
This is where you're starting to see the effect, I think, the reaction to Epic Universe. Because you're looking at up to 35% for Florida residents from May 1st to July 31st, with the caveat being that you have to book by February 10th. And of course, depending on where you're staying will affect the level of discount that you have. Obviously, the more affordable hotels will have a lesser discount. They're also offering the same deal basically for annual pass holders. That is up to 40%.
We have not seen that one in a while.
And the interesting thing about both of these opportunities is that there are no minimums. So there's no minimum stay. Obviously, if you're a pass holder, you don't have to have a ticket package. But for Florida residents, they are also not requiring a ticket package. Because not everybody who lives in the state of Florida has an annual pass to Walt Disney World. Just
this morning, they released the Florida resident ticket offer where you don't have to go consecutive days. So, you have it for like the whole summer into September, but you don't have to use, use it back to back. You could do a couple of trips if you wanted.
Thank you all so much for joining us this and every week on Monoreel Radio. Monoreel Radio will always be free, but there are many ways that you can support the show. Please give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcast. Join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms. Share your favorite episodes with family and friends who may enjoy them. And of course, book your next trip with Jackie. Links to everything can be found at monoreelradio.com. We all get one story. Make yours a magical one.
On behalf of Monoreel Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of.